Welcome to a new episode of Chronicles with Kat. I am your host, Kat. And today I have, they're special to me. And I know everyone says I have, special guests. Well, they are special to me. I have two guests that are actually friends with me today. I have Connie and Rocio. Welcome, ladies.
Hi.
So I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Let us know who you are and how long we've been friends.
You go.
Okay.
I'm Rocio Guevara, and I've known you for 5 years. Yeah. And I'm Connie Leon, and we've known each other for over 19 years. Long time.
Yes. So I did want to give a viewer advisory disclaimer. Today's topic, it is a sensitive topic, and it could be triggering to some people. We will be talking about sexual abuse. So if this is a topic that you just are not ready to listen to, this is your warning. You feel free to watch something else, watch my other episodes. And if this is a topic that maybe you may be going through something, you've never spoken about it, or you just want to hear our story and our experiences, then listen in. All right, ladies, y'all ready?
Yeah.
So we're going to begin with just kind of talking about your story, kind of like what you went through, and kind of like the mental health behind it too, right? As well as, we're all Latinas, and how your family, the perspective of your story with your family. So we'll begin. I'll begin with Connie.
Okay. So we talked about this before this to kind of review, but in my experience, it did happen at my house. It was my sister and I used to share a room. We've always shared rooms when we were younger. And we used to often, my parents would let like family members stay there. My dad did a lot of contract work. So a lot of his employees were usually my uncles or even friends of his. And sometimes those people would stay with us in our house, depending on how big our house was. And so in this instance, one of my uncles was staying there. He's a cousin of my dad's. And my sister and I shared a room. And we talked about this. I don't know if this is my own kind of defense mechanism where I've blocked it out. I don't remember if anything happened. What I remember is waking up maybe in like 3, 4 in the morning. And my uncle's like standing at our door. And my sister and I, we had like separate, twin beds or whatever. And I just remember seeing him and like jumping out of my bed, right? And I'm like, what are you doing here? In Spanish, right? Like, what are you doing here? And it kind of scared him. And so he's like trying to find his way out of the room. But at that point, I don't know how long he had been standing there, what had happened. Like, I don't know anything. I was obviously knocked out. My sister was asleep. And
can I ask, how old are you?
I think I was like 13 or 14.
Okay.
And my sister's 2 years younger, so she was like 11 or 12.
Okay.
So we're within that time frame. I was definitely younger than like 15 or 16. It was younger than that. And so I wake up, I look over to my sister, and all I remember is like she's covered up with her blanket and asleep. And I, of course, scared freak out of me, right?
Yeah.
So I immediately kind of panicked, and I started crying. So the way our house was, my room was at the end of the hall, and it's like my room, my brother, my parents. But in order for you to get to my parents' room, you had to cross like the bathroom, the kitchen, the living room, which is where my uncle was staying. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to make it out of the room. So I remember kind of like barricading my door and just kind of staying awake as best I could for the rest of the morning until there was light outside where I could just run to my parents' room. And so I don't remember now if I woke my sister up or not. I might have, but I do remember I like had like a little panic attack and started crying, right? Because at that point, I don't know what happened. Like, I really don't remember. Really, truly.
Yeah.
And we've talked about like, have we sat in therapy? And I'm pretty sure I've talked to my therapist in the past about experiences like that, right? That's the last kind of experience I've ever had, right? At that age. I think after that, I was super hyper vigilant and never really allowed anything to go further than that. I was a little bit older, maybe, I'm trying to think, besides like 16 or 17, maybe 15 or 16. One of my uncle's friends came looking for him one night, and I was the one that went to the door, but I remember like closing the door on him and like he was gone. But this was, of course, in our house and all this had happened. Anyway, so the next morning I get up and run to my parents' room and I tell my parents what happened. And my parents were very responsive. Like my mom was pissed, right? So she tells my dad, you need to tell him to leave. Like he's gone. Like this is not acceptable, right?
So your mom instantly believed you. There was no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no like nothing. My mom, like I guess because she was never a single mom, but she's always had like issues with my dad. So we were really close to my mom. And so she knew that I wouldn't be lying about something like that, right? And my mom was very hypervigilant with us. Like she was always like, you can't stay here, you can't go here. Like there were a lot of things we were not allowed to do. Well, we're not allowed to be around a lot of people like that. And so, yeah, no, my mom was an instant, like she was pissed. I think my youngest brother was still a baby. He was maybe 1 or 2. And yeah, she was mad. She was like, get him out. I don't want to see him. I don't want him in our house like ever again. And that was that. Like my dad gets up and goes outside and was like, hey, you've got to go. Like, this is not acceptable. And I don't remember like the full conversation or what my dad said. But after that, like my uncle was gone. And I don't think my sister and I ever really talked about it. Maybe once or twice. But I don't know that we've ever really, really, truly tried to figure out what happened. It's one of those things that if it happened, it's been blocked, right?
Yeah.
Out of mind, out of sight kind of thing for myself. But yeah, so initially, yeah, my parents were very responsive. I think that had they not been, I think the situation would have been really different for me in my head, right? Like knowing that they didn't believe me or they didn't do anything about it. And I still had to be in the house with him, you know, having to take care of yourself every night with that in your brain. Just for the one instance, like I remember it was very, very hard for me to process for a while. So yeah, I think that that's something that has made it a little bit better in the long run for me.
So I love the fact that you're speaking of how responsive your mom was, because we hear so many stories where the child was not, they didn't believe the child, or it might have been a step parent and the mom or dad, I mean, just didn't believe. You know, it's. I love hearing that side because you don't hear too many stories that way.
Yeah.
Did so after that day, was your uncle ever around after that, or was he ever invited to any events?
So no, because I think that the other thing is my mom is very much like me. She's very outspoken. She's never going to stay quiet about anything, especially something like this, right? And my dad he was pretty much the same. Like if he didn't agree with something, he was going to talk about it. And so I think that after that, we maybe had like family gatherings or whatever, and my mom or my dad said something to somebody, right? Another aunt, another uncle, and everybody was like, oh, wait, we kind of had that feeling about him, or he's tried to do this and that. So it was kind of a word of mouth. It started getting around, and our family's we're very united when I was younger, you know, and they were very taking care of the kids, you know, like we were a priority for them. We had like a really good childhood in that sense, right? Where all my cousins, it was a ton of cousins. We would all get together and have, you know, events or just like a Sunday morning breakfast and play, you know, games and stuff. And so, yeah, so our family was very united on that and agreed. And so, no, I never saw him again. Maybe if he was at a party or two, but it was always like, nobody really, not that they didn't, they acknowledged him, but not the same way. Like everybody was always taking care of like, if he's here, make sure everybody's safe kind of thing, right? But no, after that, like I've never really seen him. Maybe once or twice that he's reached out to my parents for whatever reason and they've talked to him. But other than that, no, I never had to worry about it from like an internal family side. No. And I feel like nobody else had to worry about it because we talked about it.
Yeah.
Because my mom spoke up and we spoke up about it. And my dad was like, yeah, no, we're not doing this. So
I don't think I've ever heard stories like this where the family is like, we're just going to let everybody know, like, this is what's going on.
No, and they did. Like, I know they did because they would treat him differently. So he would stop coming around because at that point, like, dude, everybody knows what you did, you know?
And did he know, like, did someone ever tell him, like, this is what was said?
Oh, I'm pretty sure. Like, he had to have known that people would say that about him. So, yeah.
Okay, now fast forward. You're a mom now. You have 2 kids. How did this experience affect you with your kids?
So I think because I've gone to therapy a lot, right? So from forever. And like I said, my mom and I are very close. So we've always talked through things. I've always been able to talk to my mom, go to therapy. My sister and I have always been super close. So I think that because we had that closure and we had that kind of protection from everybody, it was easy for me to process, where when my kids came along, it's not something that I've ever really worried about or had to talk to them about, other than it being an experience that they might have, right? Like with Camila, right? Like you can't let, people look at you when she was little, right? Showering or whatever, being around the house. And, so it definitely made me more open to talking to them about it early on, but not necessarily as my own experience, more so of like, just know that there's bad people out there and we can't always like trust everyone, regardless of who they are. And so, so with the kids and I, like we've been very open in the conversations, and they know from the beginning. And, you go to like the pediatrician, it's like, well, you call a vagina, and a penis. Like, make sure you use all the names. And my kids have always been like, they know their body parts, and they like, very much. After my divorce, though, I did very much always interrogate them. Like, if they were by themselves with someone or whoever it was, whether it's family or friends. And even now, like, who was there? What did y'all do? If you ever feel uncomfortable, like, make sure you tell me. So I think after my divorce, I got even more hypervigilant in trying to talk to them about that aspect, because I'm not around all the time.
Yeah.
And because, they're around his family. And yes, I know them, but my kids are older now. And so it's different. It's different.
I don't think it matters if they know them or not.
Yeah.
Just because it could be a family member, it could be a neighbor, or it could be a random Joe from, the neighborhood or whatever.
Yeah.
But you hit something where you said that you tell your kids, like, what your private parts, this is what it's called and what it is. And Rocio and I actually, on the way here, we were talking about this, because I'm like trying to think in my head, I really just want this to flow, right?
Yeah.
And she was like, one thing about me is, I talk to my kids, and she says, like, I tell them what the body parts are.
Yeah, it's like a basic 101 when you go to the PD, right? Like, that's one of the things that they tell you, is to always like, don't make up a word for it, because when it comes to like abusers, they tend to make up words for your body parts to make it feel like less shameful at the moment, or more shameful for you. And so no, my kids and I have always had like really good open conversations about everything.
Well, did your parents growing up though talk to you about sex, about, sexual abuse, about your body part is named this and that?
Not specifically, and especially not my dad, but my mom. Like I said, I was really close to my mom. We vaguely would talk about sex. It was never like a direct thing. I always got made fun of by my ex-husband, because my mom would tell me, we would go out, she'd be like, ten cuidado, eh? And that was her way of like saying, like, if you're having sex, be careful, And so that was always my ex-husband, my ex-husband. So that was always his joke. He's like, ten cuidado, eh, Connie? I'm like, be quiet. So yeah, like my mom was very, she knew things were happening, but she was very subtle about it, right? I mean, it's a different generation. Sexual abuse, she never really directly talked about it, but definitely addressed it in her own way. And it was more my mom than my dad. I don't think I've ever really like touched that subject with my dad ever.
Yeah.
And my siblings, right? Because, we were in the same age group, especially my sister and I.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm like very like, wow.
Yeah.
Y'all, your mom was just like, nah, you're not messing with my kids.
Yeah.
And
in that aspect, my mom's always been very good about like protecting us or having our backs, when it comes to, even if it's family.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm with my kids. I'm like, I don't care who it is. Whatever you do, you have to do for yourself and to protect yourself, even at school, if it's family, if it's a friend, whatever it is, because like that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
My parents were always like, you come first. So
yeah. So, Rocio, I know your story is different. I mean, I think all of our stories are different, which is why I wanted y'all here, because I want everybody to hear the different sides and stories of how the sexual abuse happened. You ready to share your story?
Yeah. I mean, I'm so pleased to hear your story. I think it's, in a way, comforting for me. Mine's very different, where I was raised by a single mom, and she was absent a lot. And so it was me, my older brother and I were left alone a lot. So that just, exposed us to a lot of people, different things. But since the age of 3 years old up to 9, 10, I was being sexually abused by different people. And it was just something that I thought it was normal for me, because no matter where I went, it would happen. And I used to think that, okay, what's going on? Why does this keep happening to me? Why are older men attracted to me that I'm a kid? Like, that's how I started to kind of analyze like my situation. So through all of that, right, my mom never talked about private parts or anything sexual. Everything was like super shameful, very taboo. We don't mention any of that. And I think because I didn't have a dad, that also made me a huge target, right? But the fact that I was looking for validation and, for a father figure, right? That made it even worse because, when I say they, I mean like pedophiles, they really look for your weak spots, right? And they know who to target. And I think I was, you walk around with that shame and, okay, well, there's no dad around, and but what I love about my story is that there was this one person in my life that, hey, I noticed something, and it was my mom's best friend. She came to live with us, and I remember the guy that was my mom's friend, and he was the one abusing us. And I say us because my brother, him too.
So the both of y'all were being sexually abused? Wow.
And I didn't learn this until later on. She noticed, she took me to the side and she asked me, hey, so I noticed, this guy, he really pays a lot of attention to you. And I just felt exposed and all this shame just like running through,
How old were you?
I was 8.
Okay.
Yeah, 8 or 9. But at the same time, I felt relief, because I felt like, okay, somebody knows, right? And I couldn't go to my mom because she was just very violent, my mom, very abusive. And I don't know if it was, and I'm not trying to make excuses for her, but she was the only one providing, and we lived in Mexico. It was really hard for her. So she had to focus on keeping us fed, right? But when she comes into the picture, the whole environment changes. It feels less heavy.
When your mom's best friend comes.
Yes. And she, when she asked me, hey, I noticed, this guy pays a lot of attention to you. Like, what's going on? And I just opened up to her. She felt so safe. And I still remember that feeling, So when you're telling your story and I, hear your mom, I'm like, yeah, that's how I felt, and she tells me, okay, you have to tell your mom. And I was so afraid of my mom. I couldn't, my mom would hit us for any little thing, but then she tells me, look, tell your mom I'll be with you. Don't be afraid. And so I did, and my mom cried and cried. She couldn't believe what was going on. And we went to the cops. Of course, nothing is done. Mexico it's a different thing.
Yeah.
And I tell her about all the other men that abused me, family members, uncles, like the places where she took me, and I was unsupervised, But that's just how that went on. Then we moved here to the U.S. My dad brought us here. And when I was 13, this man from church tried to take me into his van and, you know, kind of persuade me to go into it. And, but because of my background and all the knowledge, you know, and I'm like, okay, this is not happening here.
Yeah.
I'm not letting that happen.
You're like,
here.
red flag.
Yes. So I told my mom, she told somebody, and, you know, again, nothing was done, you know, but I spoke up, I said something, and I made others aware, you know, and that kind of just felt really good. Being able to say something, not stay quiet, because a lot of the times, you know, the men that were doing these things to me would tell me, okay, don't tell anybody. You need to keep quiet. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to get me in trouble.
The way they turn it around, you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
Like, not them, you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah. But also it's because my mom, the way she was, right, very violent with us and abusive, and just, yeah, I am going to get in trouble. So I'm not going to say anything. I'll keep my mouth shut, you know? But after that, when the church incident happened, that was it. Like, I just felt like, okay, I need to be more, you know, I need to be bold about it and just speak up and
More in control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you all moved from Mexico to here, it hadn't happened again until the church incident. Well, it didn't happen, but that was the... So did y'all continue? So you were 13. Did you continue going to the church?
Yes. So you know, church, especially like hyper charismatic churches, you know, very evangelical, we tend to be very, it's just family, right? And I compare that to Hispanic families where we just protect each other. And it's happened, you know, in my own family, if you dare to speak up about anything against anybody in our family, like, you're shunned. Like, you need to get out. You're the problem. And that happened too a lot of times. So I just, but I never back down. You know, I never back down. You can say whatever you want about me, but this is what truly happened. And what I love about life or God or whatever you want to call it is that everything comes to light eventually.
Yeah.
And people are, you know, exposed. And, you know, if they don't change their ways or, you know, whatever it is, everything will be exposed. And yeah.
So how did you feel going to church and seeing this man? I mean, I feel like it's a little different because nothing happened, right? Compared to like if you were around someone constantly that was doing something to you. So like, how did that feel going to this church where was he still very like involved with the church? Like, was he still like around, you know, teenagers? Because I mean, you were 13. So
yeah,
I mean, how was that handled?
I stayed away from him and his family. I think he used his sons. They were young men, and a lot of the young girls there, you know, liked his sons. And I think he used that kind of to bait girls into the way he came up to me was, you know, I have a son and he's very handsome and I know you like him, but I can take him to my van and I can show you what he likes.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And but because I already knew what that meant, and you know, I said, "You're really like."
You're like, hold on, I've been through a thing or two already. Not trying to make, you know, light of this, but that is very, and like,
so direct.
and you think, right? Because I know, you know, for those that go to church, we kind of put church like in this pedestal. We put our leaders in this pedestal, right? That it's supposed to feel like the safe space. And then this happening. And the fact that you brought it, I think what bothers me the most is that you brought it to their attention. And then it's kind of like, oh, we believe him. Kind of, in a way. You know what I mean? Were there people in the church that believed your story?
They did. But so the way they defended him was, well, he asked you for forgiveness and you should forgive him. That's your brother. And which, you know, I laugh about it because I think, not because I think it's funny, but it's just the impotence, right, that you feel, right, and how we use or weaponize religion.
Oh, yeah.
To exploit others. And my dad wasn't in the picture. Like, he wasn't going to church. He wasn't doing that. And I used to think if we were to, my dad is big, my dad is tall, you know, he's, and I used to think if you were to see my dad, you wouldn't be messing with me, right? But because he wasn't part of the church, you know, he didn't believe in church and stuff like that. And so that was their whole thing. If he asks you for forgiveness, then you should forgive him, you know. And at 13, I don't know. I just go with it. You know, my mom is taking me there, and okay, he's the band leader. So yeah, of course I have to forgive him and continue on. Yeah. But in my own way, you know, or rebelling against that is, I'm going to give you dirty looks, and I'm going to tell people like what he told me. And so I did. But later on, I found out that he did abuse one of my good friends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So how did from, and when you said 3, I'm like, I can't really remember much of my childhood that young, but like 3, like, wow. So like fast forward, you become a mom. Well, backtrack. Prior to becoming a mom, did you ever seek any help or go to therapy or anything like that?
No, I just thought I moved on. I, you know, got past through that, and I mean, I don't know how to say this, but I didn't feel that it affected me sexually. You know, I just thought, you know, I have a boyfriend. We have, you know,
Relations.
Yeah, and it's normal. It's fine, you know. But when I become a mom, and I didn't go to therapy. Nobody told me, hey, you should probably, you know, deal with that, you know. After I have my 2 children, that's when everything comes up to the surface, where I feel like, okay, somebody's going to abuse my children, and I have to keep them with me all the time. And I'm like this mom, like over them, you know. They didn't go to school until they were, 6 years old, you know, where I felt like I need to keep them with me.
What is that, kindergarten? 6?
Like 5 or 6. Kindergarten, and then first grade, maybe like 6, right? 7.
And so I needed to make sure where my children were all the time, and they were with me all the time. And I could tell their lives were a little bit miserable because there was no freedom, no creativity. There was no, you can't go here, you can go there, you can, you know.
That fear really manifested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you it did, because I personified fear, meaning that it affected me so much where at night, I would look out the window and I would see a man standing like outside my house, like the shadow of a man, waiting for me to sleep so that he could come in and abuse my children. That's how bad it got. Wow. That's how fear was personified in my life.
Wow.
And I just thought, okay, I need to do something about this. I'm gonna, you know, end with my life, their lives, and it got really.
The fear was just really just taking over.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when you're like, oh. So I guess when was it, like when you really started like, okay, this is it. Like, I'm just going to end this. So then none of us suffer and the fear is gone. So was that like the light bulb that went off for you to like think, I need help? Or what was that pivotal moment that this fear that was really just taking over your life, what was that pivotal moment that you were like, a change needs to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I was exhausted of always being so watchful, you know, and not sleeping because I thought this man was going to come in, you know. And one night, I was so tired and I just thought, I'm just going to end it all, you know. And I thought, if I end my life, then they're really going to get abused. So let me just take them with me.
Wow.
And you know, coming from, you know, evangelical background, I just thought, well, I know there's help. I know I don't have to do this, right? But that, to me, that was a turning point where I just thought, okay, I need to do something about this. And I can't have those thoughts, those ideas about them, you know. And I started getting involved in church and opening up and speaking up about it. And okay, I'm dealing with this. And, you know, I got into therapy, and that helped a lot. And now it's just little by little, I started letting go of my children, because eventually that's what we do as parents. You know, we let them go.
Yeah.
We don't want to stifle them, and that's what I was doing with them. And my fears were transferred to them.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't want my kids to live like that.
Yeah.
I wanted them to enjoy life and meet people and, you know, have a fulfilling life. And once I started letting go, I started seeing my children flourish and get into other things, you know, activities, and okay, that's healthy for you, you know. And it was, I when I was starting to heal, I could tell I was healing through them, because I was seeing a different childhood, right? They had a mom, they have a dad, they have a house, they're not in the same circumstances. So my experiences, I was putting that on them as if they were those two kids, right? Because I have a boy and a girl. And I thought, why am I making that for them?
Yeah.
When my life is plentiful.
How old were you when you finally started therapy, or you finally started, you know, trying to heal from the trauma?
Yeah, I was in my late 20s. So, and it was all because of my children. I just thought I need to get better for them, because if I don't, they're really gonna end up like me, like, you know, in the same situations.
And did your mom ever, like, growing, like, you know, once y'all were here growing up and after you had your kids, did she ever see anything where she said, oh, you probably need to, you know, see someone, or, you know, talk to someone? Or was it always just kind of like swept under the rug and never talked about?
You know, my mom, I don't have a relationship with my mom, unfortunately. It's very closed off on, when I was going through depression and I was going through my nighttime, you know, terrors and stuff like that. And I try to explain that to her. I don't understand. I don't understand what you're telling me. Like, I can see that it's hard, but I don't understand why you're feeling that way when you have a husband, you have a house. And I don't know if she knew the extent of the damage, you know, especially because she was a big part of that. Me not able to speak up and tell her and come to her with trust. And, you know, there was no accountability where she felt like, you know, yeah, I was a big part of that, you know. So I could never really have a conversation where it was in depth, right?
Yeah.
It was very superficial, just
Not a safe space.
it wasn't safe.
Yeah, that's very different from my situation, because I'm still very close. You know, I'm close to my mom and my sister, where we did have that safe space, right? And so it's so hard for me to listen to that, because even as a mom, you know, my kids tell me, like, literally, I'm texting with Camila now, right? About everything. Like, she tells me everything. And so it's really hard for me to think about that. And it's hard because also I think about my mom. She didn't grow up in the best situation, and her background, I don't know that anything ever happened to my mom, but she had a very similar situation to you. My grandmother was a single mom with 6 kids, and she was never around, right? She was never around. And so I don't know if things happened to my mom. But I guess in that same sense, I think that's why she was so protective of us, right? I don't know whatever has happened to my mom, but I feel like maybe if something did, that's why she turned it around and became our safe place, because she never had that for herself. So I can see for you, right, like how you're doing that for your kids, which is amazing. And so, yeah, it's hard because I've always kind of had a safe place no matter what, with my mom and with my sister, my mom, and, you know, even my ex-husband, like, we would talk about all kinds of stuff. So yeah, there was definitely those people in my life. So it's so hard, and I'm so sorry. Like, because that's just hard.
I know. And that's specifically a reason why, like, I wanted different stories, right? Like, I wanted where we don't know. You know, we talk about, like, the way our brain kind of functions, and we block stuff out. And I just really started realizing that, like, how much we block. And I was going to ask you, when you were going in therapy, were things coming to light that you like completely have blocked out or couldn't remember?
Oh yeah, definitely. Even smells, like, to that point. And I mean, I had to deal with all of that, but it was in a safe, place. So
At that point.
So my story, I think is just different overall in the sense of family and things coming to light, especially here recently. So my story, my mom was a single mom, raising 2 daughters, and I don't know honestly where my sister was. She was probably babysitter, maybe still at school. I don't know. Single mom, but she did her best, right? My mom was always there for us. I do think my mom in her past back home in El Salvador, I think something might have happened. But again, we never talked about it. At my house, we never talked about anything to do with sex. We didn't talk about private parts. We didn't even talk about menstrual cycles. Wow. That I can remember. Again, right? Watch my mom watch this and be like, "Como no, sí?" And I just don't remember. So, like, from what my memory, but what I'm learning very much is I have blocked a lot of stuff. Sometimes they'll talk about like just things like, "Oh, we used to go to Astro," and I'm like, I don't remember that. Yeah. So I think it's just me, which I will probably go down that rabbit hole with my therapist. But my story, and I thought I was 12 or 13. I just learned this week that I was 9 or 10. So my story, so my mom has always been the type with the family, like, if you need something, we're here, which I'm very much like that too. I think I'm a little bit more not so open. I'm just kind of like careful. But, my mom was always the one that all the cousins, brothers and sisters, uncles, whatever, they always knew that, like, if something was going on, if somebody was in need, like, my mom, without a shadow of a doubt, like, she'll give you the shirt off her back. And I had a relative that I don't know how long they hadn't been here from El Salvador, but he had hurt his back. And I don't know why he was at our house. I don't know if he, at the time, I didn't know if he was living with us, like that. Again, that's very, very vague. And I think it's, again, something I learned recently. It's just my brain protecting me. So it's like blocking it out. But we were, this makes more sense now, right? 9 or 10. So my parents got divorced when I was 8. And not that my dad wasn't there, but I think when you're coming from a divorce family or whatever, like, there's always that parent that's not in the household that you want more attention of, right? Or you want to feel that love from them more. So these are like little connections that I'm starting to make now. But so I was in the living room, and I don't even know what we were watching on TV, and he was on the couch, and because of his back, he was not it was very hard for him to like walk and stuff. So I'm not going to go into details, but it could have been a lot worse. I was able to get away. And I've lived with that for years. Mind you, I thought I was 12 or 13. Found out this week that I was actually 9 or 10. And I couldn't remember who I told first. I thought I had told my mom. But come to find out, my stepmom's like, no, I was the first person you told. And I think the reason why I blocked a lot of it out, I always feel like when they're going to confront someone that's probably family, like, they're going to deny it. They're not going to believe you. So my stepmom was just like, no, you came to me. And I could tell by the way you came to me, you were so fearful to tell me. And she's like, she was a stepmom. She was young. And she's like, I just wanted you to feel safe. And she goes, so I could tell by the way you told me that you were telling the truth, that you weren't lying, that you weren't trying to get attention. And that was that. I don't remember when I told my mom. I didn't even remember that my stepmom was the first person that I told. So this week, as I'm talking to her about it, because the reason why it came up is there's going to be a family event. And I've had to see my abuser at big family events. And he goes out of his way to make sure he gets my attention or tries to talk to me. But it's gotten to the point where he doesn't know which is which between my sister and I. And he'll ask, are you, Kathy, are you Kathy? And so I was, also because of the podcast, and I knew I wanted to talk about this, I think it's been like in the back of my mind. And so I was like, why? Is it just like Latino families? Because again, everybody's story is different. And I'm like, is it just Latinos family that just like sweeps things under the rug and like here we have to sit and see our abuser? Or is it just my story that is happening like this? And so we're having a family event and their sister is the one that's throwing it. And so I'm like, 100% hands down, I'm going to have to see this person again. So that's how I started talking to my stepmom again. And so like backtrack, the sibling finds out because my stepmom warns them because they have kids that are girls. And I find out that he used to take care of them and they would be left alone. So proactive thing, right? At one point, I also told my aunt, and obviously my siblings know, and then a cousin that I'm real close to. But that's really all that I know who knows from the family. So like it was never shared. It was never talked about. I'm having to see this person at events. And then I become a mom and I'm like, you stay away. So this week it comes up and I don't know if I was sleeping. I don't know if I was daydreaming. All I know is, when you're like in deep thought or you're asleep and you just kind of wake up. That's how that thought came. And I said, I have to just let them know because I know that they know that if there's some type of seating arrangement, just don't put me near them. Again, I know that they know this happened. It was never talked about. So mind you, 9 or 10, this happened. I'm 42 now, and I'm coming to realize I've never, ever dealt with it. I completely suppressed it so much that, again, I didn't even know who was the first person I told. I don't know the timeline. I don't know.
You don't remember your age, like that's...
Yeah, I didn't remember my age because I don't know if I was, which is another crazy thing. I don't know if I was trying to justify it, but making myself older type of thing. And so I reach out and I said, hey, I do want to ask for a favor. Mind you, look how I'm coming at it, right? Like,
yeah.
I want to ask for a favor. Can you just not sit me anywhere near them? The last few events I've been uncomfortable. And again, so much I suppressed it. They mentioned his name and I'm like, who's that?
Oh, well.
I legit don't remember his name. So then I had to sit here and think of all the names of the siblings. And I didn't respond because I'm like, I guess that's his name. Like that's, and then I'm going through this rabbit hole. Like, is it that? How much I've suppressed it? That I don't realize. And then I get can we talk? And I'm like, all right, it's been a long time coming. And so we had a conversation where I really don't know how I was left. If anything, I just feel like my family's just kind of swept it under the rug. And I let the sibling know, like, I literally have had to ask if he's going to be around so I can either decide if I'm not going to attend or prepare myself. But I also am like, why am I the one that has to prepare myself? Yeah. Like, why?
Nothing's being put on him.
Yeah. And like, the sibling was like, oh, like, I hope grandma doesn't know, mentioned a few times. And I'm just like, so I'm sitting here having a conversation where I understand that they want to know, like, and how bad they feel and they're apologizing. But at the same time, it's left me so annoyed, like, why are we sweeping it under the rug? Not that I want to voice it out to everybody, right? Like, fulanito did this, right? Mm-hmm. But my thing is, like, I feel like it's so hush-hush. I feel like we're protecting him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they are. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, they are. And I don't think you're the only one. I mean, there's other situations in my family that have been like that. Not something like sexual abuse, but other stuff, right?
Yeah.
Where they're ultimately trying to protect that other person for whatever reason.
Yeah, I called Connie. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't think I had talked to the sibling yet. And I'm like crying. Mm-hmm. And her first question It's like, have you talked to your therapist about this? I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so. But I just don't think I realized I had never dealt with it or that I can remember, right? And so I told Connie, I was like, well, I'll be talking about it next week in therapy, because, we also like
but
to
it's not until that situation comes up, right? Because like Rocio was saying, hers didn't come up until she had her kids, right? And she didn't deal with it until she was in her 20s. So this is your triggering situation, right? Where, yeah.
Which I find, like I did become a mom. And so like I did become like I was the same way, like you can't go here, you can't go there. And you just have to be careful. But, I'm grateful in a way. And I use that term very loosely because I was like crying for days, like really processing this because now I can address it in therapy. And it's crazy that our mind, even though like yours was different and you just became super hyper vigilant with your child, you realize like the fear manifested and like how it was a battlefield of your mind, and mine, how I just completely suppressed it, like how our mind really works.
Well, I think we can only suppress it for so long. So the mind is like, okay.
Until it surfaces, right? Like with certain situations or certain triggers.
Yeah.
Like this whole conversation might trigger somebody outside of here.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. But all that to say, like, I know you're in therapy. I loved hearing that, you sought therapy, you even sent me a book this week, because, I talked to you about it too, on how like this just came up and I realized, and I'm glad that I'm in therapy now. And probably is happening now because I wasn't in therapy for so long, and that now I am, and I've been on that, healing journey, trying to really learn myself. So, it's kind of like, okay, I understand. So I know when the podcast was going to launch, I was like, this is a topic that I have to talk about, because I know there's so many other people with their stories that are either fearful to talk about it, or they've had the situation where it's swept under the rug, or maybe they've had it where their parents are like, no, this is that, or they had a friend step in and it's like, no, you needed to tell someone, and made it that safe space. So yeah, I think, sexual abuse, especially in the Latino community, is not talked about. That's very taboo. So I personally appreciate the fact that y'all agreed to come and share your stories, and make it a safe space where I can also share mine, and not shedding tears on camera. So I really do appreciate it. Anything that you want to share with the audience that maybe will give them encouragement if they're going through something like this, or maybe they're wondering, they see someone that, this seems off, or a parent that's like, I don't know, any advice or encouragement or resources that y'all would like to share?
I think for me, it's the double, like, be very vigilant of other people, like you said, right? Getting to know people, like when they act differently, through therapy and just pediatrician talk, learning when my daughter is like in a bad mood versus something really happened to her, like really, really learning those signs. I think that's one of the biggest triggers for me, is when I hear situations like this and the mom is like totally oblivious. It makes me so mad, because I'm like, this is your child. And I get it, like not all parents are the same, but it makes me very upset that you're not paying attention. Even with my son right now, there's so many things that I pay attention to him about, like how he gets angry, why he's getting angry. And so we're very close to that space right now where I'm like, he's probably gonna have to go to therapy. There's something there going on. So I think being hypervigilant of others around, like you, and then also for yourself, being aware of like, if something did happen to you, seeking those resources and seeking that help. And there's so many different resources. One, like general one, is the Women's Resource Center. They do a lot of help for women who have been trafficked or abused. So they have a ton of different helplines and counseling and stuff that you can go to for free, because I've used their resources before. So yeah, I think definitely it's just being that vigilant for yourself and others around you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. And I think I also, just working on yourself, becoming a safe person, a safe parent for your child, because I didn't have that growing up. And I mean, I have a great relationship with my children. I have 2 teenagers, and they're very open, and whenever something's going on, I watch my reactions. That's what I know to do.
Yeah.
Right. I know if it's something heavy, if it's something that it's really gonna bother me or want to get mad about, I watch that because it builds trust.
Yeah.
In them. I want to always build that bridge with them where, hey, this is what's happening, and yeah, I mean, just become aware and about other people's, I mean, I'm very aware as it is because people's, emotions, moods, and I just learned that.
Yeah.
And so when something is shifting or something shifts, pay attention to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to agree. I have a really good relationship with my daughter. I mean, she'll even admit, like, my mom's my best friend. She won't tell me, but I'm her close friend. I see what you think. But I know that because she's also in therapy, and it's taken me, like, to unlearn what, like, I learned, like, about therapy and stuff. Like, she does for the majority of the time. Your teenager is going to tell you what she's going to want to tell you, right? Yeah. It doesn't matter. But it is that safe space where she can come and she will talk to me, and she knows that I won't, in certain aspects, I won't always just remotely take her side. I always want her to see the bigger picture. But I know for 100%, if something like this were to happen, she knows she can come to me, and that I'm going to be like all gun ho. Yeah. So that's great advice for her.
Yeah, I think also like learning how to follow your own instincts, because what happens in sexual abuse is that you are told. It's a whole it's like cognitive dissonance, right? You have this person who is loving you, but is also damaging you.
Yeah.
Right? A person that you think you can trust, but is also breaking that trust. And so there's this internal conflict, that's going on. And so how do you equip a child to learn to follow that gut feeling where this feels wrong, so you must be wrong. Yeah, I need to tell somebody, right? And I always I have 2 young girls, and 11 and 5, and go with the gut feeling. Yeah, follow that instinct. Trust yourself in that way. Don't let people know you're seeing things wrong, right? Or you're hearing wrong. Or, I don't know. No, follow that, and I think it builds you up. It makes you stronger, and speak up, say something. It doesn't matter whatever people are going to call you, they're going to call you, but say something. Yeah, they will listen.
That safe space of like, speak up. Yeah, my daughter will say, oh, he's giving me petty files. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. Because I was feeling them too. And that's why I was telling you, like, just be careful who you're around. So I'm glad we're building that safe space for our children.
And in that sense of like safe spaces, knowing that if one adult doesn't believe you or doesn't want to listen, there's going to be like her mom's best friend, right? There's going to be somebody out there who's willing to listen and help you. And so not giving up on yourself, right? In that sense, and finding that safe place for yourself. If it's not your parents, it's a friend, it's a sister, it's a cousin, it's a neighbor, whatever that is, a teacher, right? Like these kids are at school all the time with their teachers. So yeah, it's finding that place and never giving up on yourself for sure.
Yeah. Ladies, I really appreciate you being here. It means the world to me. So I'm very thankful. For everybody else out there, thank you for watching. I know this is a very heavy topic. Just know you're not alone if you're going through a situation like this. If you do not have the resources, or you don't have insurance, if you do have insurance, there's so many resources out there that we can share with you. And if you don't have a safe space, you can feel free to reach out to me, and I personally will try to see any resources that we can get out to you. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time. Bye.